Evening. Welcome to the museum at MFIT's Fashion Culture Series. My name is Tania Melendez Escalante, and I am Senior Curator of Education and Public Programs. It is my honor to introduce photographer Janette Beckman as she presents her most recent book, Rebels: From Punk to Dior. A celebrated street photographer, Beckman photographed the legends of hip-hop and other underground scenes, including rapper Salt-N-Pepa, wearing Dapper Dan or Slick Rick with his gold chains. This book showcases the spirit of a generation that made history and continues to influence the world of fashion and the international collective imagination. At the end of her presentation, Janette will take questions from the audience, and we'll finish the evening with a book signing. I ask you to please silence your devices right now, and please join me in welcoming Janette Beckman.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming. This is exciting, and thank you, Tanya, for that great intro. So, I'm Janette. I'm a photographer, and I've actually been taking photos for 40 years, which is a long time. And you may be able to recognize from my accent, I'm British. I started in London, and I grew up in London, and I really wanted to be a portrait painter. I grew up coming to museums like this and seeing pictures of, you know, lords and ladies riding horses in 1850, and I was like, oh, that's so cool. That's what they did in Italy in 1850. That's what it was like in 1760 in, I don't know, France or whatever. And so I went to art school to be a painter, but I don't know. I didn't think I was, the first year, I just didn't think I was really good enough, and I decided to go to photo school instead. And that led me to make portraits with my camera. And this is my book that just came out. So I'm just going to go through. So when I came out of art school, I was teaching in a college for 17-year-olds, I would say, and actually, Johnny Rotten from the Sex Pistols, you guys probably have heard of the Sex Pistols, had just left the college, but he wasn't a Sex Pistol at that point, he was just a student. So it was kind of a lot of punks, a lot of squatters, a lot of kids, you know, who were smoking weed in the dark room. And one day I went out into the schoolyard to go to lunch, and I saw these guys, and they were just hanging around in the schoolyard, and I went up to them. I had my camera, and I said, do you mind if I take a picture of you? We started talking, and their names are Chaka and Dubem, and they're identical twins, as you can see, and they became very famous in the neighborhood, which was Islington in London, and they're called the Islington Twins. And actually, if you follow me on my Instagram, I'm still in touch with them. I took this picture, I think, 1976, 77 or so, and I'm still in touch with them to this day, and every time I go to London, I make another portrait of them. I didn't really know I wanted to be a music photographer, but one day I walked, we had 4 music magazines, weekly music newspapers actually at the time, and one day I walked into one called Sounds with my portfolio, and I didn't have any music photography in there whatsoever. I had just been to LA, I had pictures of, you know, neon and palm trees and some people things, but no music. And I met this woman, Vivian Goldman, who actually, yes, is the professor of punk at NYU to this day, and we're good friends. And she was the editor there, and she said, oh, I like your pictures. What are you doing tonight? Do you want to go and take a picture of Susie and the Banshees, which was, you know, just about the hottest band at the time. And so I went to this place called the Roundhouse, and I had to figure out how to take a picture of a live band in a dark place, but I managed to figure it out. And, you know, since we're in the College of Fashion, just looking at what she's wearing, I mean, she was kind of cross-dressing in a way before we even thought about trans or any of this. She's wearing a tie, a shirt. Those are probably men's trousers that she got in a thrift store because we all used to buy our clothes in the thrift store. And she has this fierce makeup on. And I think her style is absolutely amazing. Here's the Sex Pistols. This is right before they got super famous and said in England the F word on TV, which was like pretty much a groundbreaking moment for us punks. And they're rehearsing in a little studio in what we call Tin Pan Alley. And, you know, I'm just going to make some comments about what they're wearing, because Johnny Rotten, who's in the middle, and that's the bondage suit. It may have been designed by Vivienne Westwood. I'm not 100% sure of that, but they were getting a lot of clothes from her at the time. And obviously, the T-shirt with Destroy on it. I mean, this really is 100% punk. There's a street in London called the King's Road, and that was the place where all the punks used to come and show off what they were wearing and what the fashion was of the day. And there was a store called Boy on King's Road. You see these guys on the left. So one day I was on a photo assignment for a teen magazine, and I went up and down King's Road on a Saturday, and I spotted these kids standing outside Boy. And I really love their style. I mean, the boots, the jeans, the way the jeans are cut off, and, you know, you can't really tell if they're 3 boys, 3 girls, 4 girls and a boy. I don't really know. But I just got chatting to them, and I really love that picture. The top one is where the punks all used to hang out on King's Road outside in this little area. It was called World's End. And they used to just hang out there. All the runaways would hang out there, the kids who'd left their parents. And you know, actually, the girl second from the left, the one with the big white spiky hair, that is a woman, now a mother, called Sarah Dunham, that I'm in touch with. And she was a runaway. She ran away from home. And she's making a little doc right now. She's just with her daughters about what it was really like to be a punk living on the street. And the girls underneath, they're in Hyde Park when Sid Vicious died. All the punks came out. And I kind of love their style too, because it looks like they're wearing their school jacket uniforms, but, you know, they're wearing kilts. One's got that Clash T-shirt on. And once again, you know, the makeup is like super fierce. That is also on the Sid Vicious Memorial March. And there were thousands of punks turned out in London after Sid died. And in fact, there were probably more punks than police. There were tons of police. And I just, you know, was wandering around in the crowd. I was reporting it for the paper I was working for, Melody Maker. I spotted these 2 guys. And I posted this picture up on Instagram. And I will say to you all, kind of love the power of Instagram, because the guy on the right, his daughter got in touch with me and said, "Oh, that's my dad." And so, which is really fabulous. That's my dad in the picture. So I ended up making a really nice big print for him and sending it to him. And, you know, we got in touch and I met them. And it's like the coolest thing, you know, like 40 years later, he's a dad with fully grown daughters. And that person on the right, that's another Instagram story. I posted that up on Instagram, and I put something like, "This beautiful girl was on the street in London in 1977. And I got this message back, a DM, saying, actually, that's not a girl, that's me. I'm a boy. I was a drummer in a punk band, and my name was Vomit, which I really love. So I end up being friends with Vomit now on social media. I send him pictures, and yeah, it's pretty, he's a pretty gorgeous looking person. Also in England, there were all these different types of music going on at the time, and reggae was huge in London. A lot of the bands like The Clash were working with reggae beats, and I call these guys the Ladbroke Grove reggae crew. And they had these massive speakers. I shot them backstage at a reggae concert. And I love these girls. They were at a concert in Coventry, and it was some ska bands were playing, like the Specials, which was a really famous band back in the day. They played ska music and reggae, and they were also punky. But these girls just did this little pose for me on the street. I didn't tell them to do it, they just did it. And you know, their style, they're all wearing the same, looks like probably Fred Perry shirts. And look at their shoes. I mean, check out, they've got loafers, they've got little shoes with little heels on. I just think the style is so cool. This is a mod girl. They were also mods. That was another culture that followed bands like The Clash. And I was teaching in a youth club in the evening, and all the kids would come dressed. She came one day just dressed like this, and I obviously had to take a picture of her. And here's a couple, those were her friends on the left. I mean, they would just turn up at a youth club to hang out dressed like that. On the right is a picture of a guy called Jerry Dammers, who's in the Specials. And this was just in an Airbnb. I went on tour with them. And crazily enough, those trousers, we think maybe Burberry, which is nuts. And Burberry had a big show right before the pandemic, and they blew this picture up to more than life size and had it hanging on the wall. So it's kind of crazy. I never thought about Jerry wearing Burberry, but he was that guy. He was a well-dressed dude. And we also had Teddy Boys, Rockabilly Kids, and this is the day Elvis passed away. And all the Rockabilly boys turned out in South London to honor Elvis. And somehow I just happened to be going by and saw them. And, you know, the hairstyles. Look at that guy in the front with his hair. I mean, it's really cool. So in that time in London, there were all these different styles going on, which was really cool for me and my camera. This, you guys probably all know who this is. It's Boy George, and he's dressed head to toe in Vivienne Westwood. I mean, from the hat, everything. He just looks amazing. And it was the week before his record went to #1, and there was some kind of resistance in the newspaper I was working for. It was called Melody Maker. It was more of a rock paper, and I was photographing all the punks, and there was some resistance about putting somebody like him, who they perceived to be, you know, not a straight man rocker, let's put it like that, on the cover of the magazine. And they were going to put Led Zeppelin, but for some reason that photo shoot fell through. So we persuaded them to put him on the cover, and that week his record went to #1, and we beat out all the competition, and it was all very exciting. And obviously Boy George became a superstar. He still is a superstar. Okay, so in 1982, the first ever rap tour to come to England, in fact, to come to Europe, came, and it was in the fall. And we decided we were going to cover it for our newspaper, and I put my hand up in the meeting and said I want to go photograph them. So we never had art directors or anybody standing over. So they just like, here's where they're staying, go there. So I went there to this little Airbnb, and I met all these people who, I mean, I don't know if you guys have seen the show that you've got here, FIT, the amazing hip hop show, but there was something about the energy and the style of these people that was so different from the punks that I'd been photographing. I mean, they had this kind of super positive energy, and they seemed happy. They were like thrilled to be in London. So that afternoon, I photographed a lot of famous people, and this is at the show. I was completely blown away because on stage at this rap show, which we'd never seen rap, were graffiti artists, break dancers, rappers, DJs. And in this picture, it's Africa Bambaataa, Fab Five Freddy, Rammellzee, and Dondi, and actually that's Future in the back with a little check shirt. But they were all doing their thing on stage at the same time, and it was really a renaissance moment for me because I'd never seen anything like it, and I just loved the energy of it. So I was coming to visit a friend in New York for Christmas, and this is DST at that same concert. And look at that name belt, you guys. I mean, look at what he's wearing, the jewelry, the hat, the styling. And he has a shirt that says Roxy, and the Roxy was like a super famous club in New York. So I ended up moving to New York and starting to photograph hip hop. And these guys were managed by Malcolm McLaren. This is one of the first photo shoots, and I think Futura might have done that backdrop. Oops, sorry. And I thought, because I'd shot 3 album covers for the two album covers for the Police, and I'd shot Boy George, I'd shot The Clash, that I was going to come here and get a lot of work for the big record companies like CBS and Sony, and they didn't really like my photos. I would go in there with my portfolio, and they'd go, well, we can't really hire you because people in your pictures look too messy. That you can see their zits, their hair isn't combed. You know, in those days, everything was very airbrushed and perfect. And so I couldn't get any work, which was kind of weird to me because I'd been photographing all these bands in London. And eventually they said, well, there's this group called the Fearless Four. You know, there's this new thing called rap. Would you like to do their album cover? And I was like, yes, of course, whatever. So this is the first album cover I did for as far as hip hop. And I remember, I mean, going to the studio. We hired a studio. These guys turned up. And for a start, look at what they're wearing. They look amazing. I mean, they just look incredible. And they've got that little tiger tail thing, and you can see the nameplates, and the hair. I mean, it just was incredible. And they were all smoking weed in there. It was it was playing loud music. It was really an experience, but I loved it. I loved it. So this is my first album cover. And I was working for a British magazine called The Face. It was a famous magazine. And they commissioned me to photograph this new group called Run DMC, 1984. And in those days, we didn't have, you know, cell phones, we didn't have pages, we didn't have computers. So basically, they called me and they said, well, here's this phone number, just call it and, you know, go get the picture. I called the number, and it was Jam Master Jay's mom's house. So, you know, she puts Jay on the phone, and he's like, oh, yeah, okay, come meet me in Hollis. And I'm not from here. I didn't know where Hollis was. So I jump on the train with my Hasselblad camera and go meet them. And we walk down the street, and this is the street where they lived. And it was like a spring afternoon, you know, sort of dappled sunlight. And they're just standing there with a bunch of friends. And it was like the most beautiful, it was very serene somehow. And they were like, oh, okay, what do you want us to do? And I was like, just stand right there. And this picture actually is sort of one of my most famous pictures at this point, because it's just such a moment in time. And they didn't know who I was. I didn't know who they were. And there's something about their attitude. It was just so cool. And, you know, the style, look at the sneakers. They've got Kangols, Gazelle glasses. And they're just chilling on a spring afternoon. It really is, it's a captured moment. And it definitely, I think, at this point, as far as fashion and hip-hop, it was a turning point where people wore their own street clothes on stage suddenly, as opposed to looking like the guys in the Fearless Four who really had sort of costumes made for them. And, you know, shortly thereafter, they got sponsored by Adidas and became incredibly famous. You guys probably have seen this picture before. It's LL Cool J. It's his first ever press picture. So he came to my studio, and he had the boombox, and I always had my lights set up ready. And he just stepped onto my little set and put the boombox on his shoulder, and I got the picture. And, you know, he was 17 maybe at the time. It was so beautiful. And he just, you could just tell that he was, you know, something good was going to happen for him. He was going to become some kind of star. Here is the first picture I ever took of Salt-N-Pepa. And I also took this for a British magazine. And at the time, they didn't even have a record out. And it was a hot summer's day. I was living on Avenue B and 8th Street on the Lower East Side. So I said, okay, just meet me at my apartment. So they came around, and we just decided to walk around on the Lower East Side. And it was kind of a sketchy neighborhood back then. And we were just kind of having fun, like posing in front of murals. And, you know, obviously it was hot. We went to the deli, and we were just getting along, kind of giggling and laughing and having a good time. And so I captured this picture of them outside a deli on Avenue B and I think 3rd Street. And funnily enough, recently, it's just got really famous, like Vogue ran it, and, you know, it's in the Photographiska show, and it's gotten a lot of play. I think it's just so, it's very fresh, and, you know, they've got chains, they've got gold earrings, and they're not even, you know, but they're just girls from Queens, basically. So that day they said to me, oh, Janette, would you take our record cover for us? We're doing a record. And I was like, okay. And that led to a relationship where, you know, I ended up taking this picture of them. I think it was the second album cover shoot I did for them. And they came to the studio just dressed like this. And they didn't have a stylist. We had a hair and makeup person for them. And those jackets were so amazing, and their attitude and their sort of female power was really incredible. And they'd just come out with that song, Let's Talk About Sex, which basically was an answer to all the guys who'd been talking about girls around the way, and this one's fly and this one isn't. They were like, wait a minute, you know, we want to talk about women, how we feel. So those jackets, I later found out, were made by the one and only Dapper Dan, and you can see his work in your museum right now. And it's a pretty famous picture, and I think, you know, if you were going to go dress as a girl rapper for Halloween, you would probably want to go looking like this. Also, I was working for Paper magazine, and we decided to have a symposium women rappers, and they all turned up at this restaurant actually on West Broadway in Soho for the photo shoot, and they came with their, you know, brothers and boyfriends, and we were like, no guys allowed. So we got this picture of them, and there's MC Light, there's Roxanne Shante, there's Millie Jackson, you know, there's a lot of Sweet Tea, Jazzy Joyce, Miss Melody, a lot of famous rappers in this picture. Okay, so Public Enemy, they, you know, come up with Fight the Power. I was doing portraits of them, and I really love this portrait. And Flavor, as you know, famous for clocks. And I think this was his first clock, which is actually a stopwatch. So I took this in 1987. Stetsasonic, I saw this Stetson sign. I thought it would be a good place. It's out in Brooklyn. I love what they're wearing too. It's just so of the moment. This is Big Daddy Kane, who's got to be one of the most handsome men, the best haircut. Because a lot of this fashion was also about the haircuts. You know, it was a huge thing. This is the one and only Slick Rick. And we had actually, this is a picture I took for, it was going to be on the cover of my first ever book about hip hop, which I did with Bill Adler, which was called Portraits and Lyrics of a Generation of Black Rockers. And this would have been a really incredible cover. However, he got in some kind of beef with somebody and shot someone and ended up in jail, and our publisher said we can't put somebody in jail who, you know, on the cover of a magazine, a book rather. So we ended up putting Big Daddy Kane, which wasn't so shabby either. But, you know, Slick Rick is amazing. I mean, as far as hip hop and jewelry, I think, you know, he really deserves the crown he's wearing. This is Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, which I shot for an album cover for them. I think it was called Gold in 1988. And as you can see, they're a bit of a wild and crazy crew, but their style is, I don't know, it's very individual. I mean, I love that pink suit at the far left, really beautiful. MC Light, one of the best female rappers in Brooklyn. This is EPMD, and it's kind of a famous picture, not only because EPMD, it was the third album cover I'd shot for them, but the cars are incredible. There's a Mercedes and an IROC, and the picture is even famous because the rims, apparently, of the cars are really special, and there's a whole culture around that. And the story goes, I was waiting for them to turn up. It was, once again, no cell phones, we didn't have pagers, we didn't have anything. They told me to meet them at this spot, which is kind of a lonely spot out in Long Island, and they were supposed to get there at midday. By 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they hadn't turned up, and it was the fall. The sun was starting to go down. I was getting super nervous, like, where are these guys? So I had to drive to a phone box, put a quarter in the phone box, call the manager. He goes, oh, yeah, they're getting the rims on their car polished in the Bronx. And I was like, the Bronx? But how are they going to get there? So that just as the sun is kind of getting low in the sky, I hear them coming down the street, and I already had a plan for them to park in a kind of V shape like that. So they park in a V shape, and they get out of their cars. They're sitting on the hoods, and they're like, what should we do? And I was like, you look great. Let me just get this shot. And I'm literally, it was an album cover. I probably took 15 minutes to do the whole thing. But the thing that really blew my mind when they got out of their cars was what they were wearing, because, I mean, they were ahead of their time, and to me, it kind of looked like they were wearing ladies' pajamas. I mean, there was sort of these long, flowy, cottony things. I'd never seen a style like it, and the bucket hats as well were not really, I mean, I think, you know, they might have been responsible for the bucket hat, or at least for making it famous. The chains, obviously. It's a really great picture, and that ended up being on the cover. Tribe Called Quest, when style went Afrocentric, we wanted to photograph them with sort of in a park or something, but it's New York City, and you know, they just aren't parts. So I had the idea to go to the Chelsea Flower Market, which is just right around the corner from here, and we found this greenery, and I love the fact someone brought along their little cousin. So, you know, the kid always steals the picture. This is Ice Cube outside his mom's house in LA. And that car kind of says a lot, because it's a sidekick, and that was, you know, the car of choice. It was, I mean, I don't even know if you can find those cars these days. No, they're not, right? But I thought it was super cool. This is the Booyah Tribe, who were rappers that played live music on TV, on stage. They had horns, and they were formerly a gang, but they were all cousins and brothers, and one of them got shot, so they decided to become rappers instead of being gang, which I thought maybe was a better idea. So I wanted to take a picture of them for my book, and they took me up on the roof of Virgin Records in LA, and I was like, you know, I'm on the roof with these big, muscly guys, and I'm like, either I'm going to get a really nice picture, or, you know, if I'm not nice, I could so easily go off the edge of that roof. But turn out, it all worked out. This is part of a project I did in 1983 about an East LA gang called the Oyo Maravilla. And the style really speaks, I think, to kind of a West Coast style. Just crisp, you know, everything is crisp. Like the shirts, they're all neat, but they're like in a park in a really bad neighborhood. And these girls turned up one day. I was going there every day over a period of a couple of months, and these girls had heard that there was some crazy British photographer who was hanging around in the park, so they came down to get their picture taken. And actually, I still talk to these girls to this day, because a little book was made, and social media, once again, they saw the book on social media and on Instagram and got in touch with me in 2012. I went and met them, and they were telling me that that park was really dangerous, and they were involved in this big gang war, and all the guys that I'd photographed, 90% of them were either dead or in prison, and these ladies had survived, and their story is really amazing, because one of them works for the DA's office, one of them works in homeboy rehabilitation and keeping people out of the gangs, and the other one drives a Mercedes and is huge in human resources. So they've really, you know, they made something of themselves, and now I've met their, you know, their kids and their grandkids, and if I have a show in LA, they all turn up, which is really a beautiful thing. This is Andre 3000, and I mean, I don't know what to tell you. Just like, he was wearing these pants that looked like he'd made them out of, I don't know, some kind of curtain material. And I just thought his style was so cool. That pose is incredible. It's beautiful. Here's some street pictures. That guy on the left is obviously a skateboarder. I was photographing in a skateboard competition, and I just thought his style was amazing. Just everything. He's the jams, the cons, the hat, everything. And actually, IKEA wanted to use that in an ads on a billboard, and I couldn't find him. I mean, this was about 10 years later. I went to every single skateboard shop in the city going, do you know this guy? Nobody. And recently, somebody got in touch with me and said, oh, I know him. You know, he's on Hard Times, and we're doing a benefit. So I gave them the picture, and I think they made some money for him, which is a cool thing. This lady on the left, I was photographing a bike gang in Harlem called the Go Hard Boys. I got to be friends with them, and they don't actually let anyone photograph them, but I went and met the CEO, and he said, okay, I'm going to hook you up because you photographed all these hip-hop people. I think you're cool. And I ended up hanging out with him a lot. This girl arrived on that motorbike in those heels, and just the whole outfit. I mean, it doesn't look like an outfit you would ride a bike with, but it's definitely cool. This dude, Tony Tonius, I was photographing people who live in an SRO in Times Square, and he turned up, and I just think, you know, you see pictures in really fabulous fashion magazines. There's so many big ones around, and they try and do styling like this, but this guy, you know, he didn't have any money. He's living in an SRO. He was a little bit crazy, but look at the way he presented himself. I mean, it's incredible. I think it's really beautiful. This is something I shot for Interview magazine. I used to shoot a lot for them, and we were doing a story about Stone Island, the brand, and we wanted to make it look really street. So me and the stylist, street cast, we just went around to Supreme and places where, you know, like Kith, where they have lines of people outside, and just street cast people, like, do you want to be in a photo shoot? And we found all these people, these guys and one girl, actually, and did a shot at the back of Canal Street in a seedy alley that I'm quite fond of. But I like it. That's actually a back of a truck that we just were like, is it okay if we just take a picture? And it's got like a really cool vibe to it, I think. Okay, this you guys probably know. I also shot this for Interview. It was, I was the first person to shoot the Dapper Dan Gucci collaboration, and I don't know if you guys know the story of how Dapper Dan, you know, used to print his own Gucci and whatever fabric back in the day, and then, more, I guess 2017 or 18, Gucci ripped off a Dapper Dan design, and people went crazy, and they had to collaborate with Dapper Dan, and they opened an atelier together up in Harlem. And this is Dap standing outside his house with the models that we were shooting that day, because I wanted to do the shoot, obviously, in Harlem. I thought it was the right thing to do. And, well, Dapper Dan is an icon. This is a couple of the shots we did. It was actually a sort of daylight today. It was sort of raining on and off, and we were just dodging the showers. But that's like a jewelry shop on like 125th Street, and that's right around the corner. But I love the style. Look at the socks, the sneakers, flip-flops. It's wild. This is a shoot I did. I did the 2018 campaign for Levi's, and we basically threw street parties, one in Jersey City and one in Bed-Stuy, and it was, I have to say, one of the coolest shoots I've ever worked on, because I mean, I had to shoot some models, but we were street casting at the same time. And this is, we got some Double Dutch girls. Who else? We've got Stretch and Bobito DJing. We just took pictures of people on the street. That dude with the beard, he was not a model. He was just somebody that was hanging out. And I was like, oh, he's handsome. Let's take a picture of him. They put a Levi's T-shirt on him, gave him some money. And it was an incredible shoot. It was a 3-day shoot, and it was maybe one of the most fun. I mean, we opened the fire hydrant on the bottom left, and all the local kids came out, and we put T-shirts on them, and they all were part of the campaign. It was really about community, and, you know, I don't know if you guys know, but it's the 150th anniversary, can you believe it, of the Levi 501 this year, which is kind of crazy. So, yeah, I'm a big fan of what they do. Some more Levi's. We just found a barber shop. We went in there and photographed this guy in the barber shop. You could see the guy getting his hair cut in the background. And that's just a whole, we street cast that little baby, popped him into a little Levi's outfit. I mean, it was really incredible. That kid turned up on his bicycle, like jump in the picture. And we were really having fun with it. It was more fun than you should have on a you know, big photo shoot like that. I also got hired because Dior has, for the first time, a woman creative designer, Maria Grazia Chiuri, and this was her first collection in Paris, and she's a big fan of punk. So somehow or another, somebody gave her my punk book called Made in the UK, and it was kind of crazy. I was in Detroit photographing graffiti artists, so I was sort of sitting on the ground in a parking lot covered in crack vials in a dodgy area of Detroit when I get this phone call going, hello, this is, we're calling from Dior. Would you like to come and photograph our collection? I thought it was actually a joke. I was like, sure, just, you know, going along with a joke. I thought someone was pranking me, but turned out that Maria Grazia wanted to bring me the next week to photograph her campaign. So I went there with an assistant, and I hadn't talked to them about what I was going to do. And so they were like, well, you're going to arrive here and you'll have a meeting with Maria. And I'm like, okay. And so she's sitting behind the desk, and she goes, well, what do you want to do? And just out of nowhere, popped into my head, I want to photograph the making of the collection as if I was photographing backstage at a punk concert. So basically, she gave me an all access, and it was a week while she was still making the collection. So I got to photograph the tailors, the model, go-sees, the, you know, backstage at the show, everything, the whole making of the show. And we decided to do everything in black and white. And basically, I worked for 12 hours a day at least, just running around, photographing everything. And there was a lot to shoot. And I kept saying, you know, do you like what I'm doing? And they kept saying, we don't have time to look, we don't have time to look. And the very last day, after the show, after everybody said the show was amazing, the PR comes to me, and he just whispers in my ear, Janette, we love everything you did. And I was like, oh, God. It's like a whole week of torture. Anyway, a couple of years later, they hired me to go to London to photograph their models on the street where I'd photographed punks. Oh, fabulous. Okay, here's questions. Okay, so this is good. This is in London on the streets. And this is a shoot I did the day before the month before the pandemic started. April Walker, who you guys probably know because she's a very famous hip-hop designer. There she is sitting on the floor. And a bunch of models were shooting it for a magazine. And I didn't know that she had asked her friend Method Man to come to the shoot. And I don't know if you guys know who Method Man is, but this guy just turned up. He was super nice. He didn't come with a whole gang. And then she was like, oh, Method, you're wearing this. And I was like, oh, shit, that's Method Man. I can't believe it. Anyway, so, but it was a really cool shoot. There he is. Wonderful man. I think I have some questions here. Wow. Oh, there's a lot. There's more? Oh, shit. Okay, I mean, oops. Okay. Who is somebody you never got a chance to photograph that you wish you could have? Okay? I don't know who asked that question, but I would say, it's funny because I just did an interview with somebody and they asked a similar question, Prince. Sadly, I think Prince was amazing. I mean, he was one of the most creative, musical, just style, fashion. I saw him play so many times, and I wish, and Aretha Franklin, that's the other one. Okay. Sorry. Something will be photographing, something. Oh, I'm having a problem reading this. Might need help. If you could read this for me. I'll do the next one. I see a variety of black and white picture and color. How do you choose when to shoot in color? How do you think color changes the story and the image? That is like an amazing question. Okay, so I actually am a fan of black and white, and a lot of the photographers I really admire, like William Klein and Avedon and Mary Ellen Mark, shoot in black and white. But there's some times like this where color is really important. And sometimes, you know, I mean, if you guys take pictures, usually probably you're doing digital, and the great thing is you shoot it in color and you can make it black and white. And that's kind of how I decide these days. Like, I shoot everything in color, and then sometimes when I'm on the computer looking at it, I'm like, let me just see what it looks like in black and white. And sometimes I feel like black and white is stronger in a way, but, you know, I mean, oh, here, right, here's a good example, actually. It's my last photo. I don't know if you guys know who this guy is. I just shot this like 2 weeks ago. I'm not supposed to be showing it, but you guys are here. So it's actually Christian Smalls, who started the Amazon Union, and he's an activist. I'm doing a series of activists for a kind of high-end fashion magazine, and I just thought it was stronger in black and white. I mean, I feel like it's a strong portrait, and yeah, I don't have it in color to show you, but it just didn't really need color. Whereas, you know, Method Man, he needs color. There's no doubt. This needs color. Look at that pink that April's wearing. I mean, this in black and white would not be as good. This, too, obviously, just made for color. But this works in black and white. It's hard. It's a good question. Okay, this one. What time of the day is your favorite time to shoot? And what camera and shooting techniques are your favorites? Okay, so, you know, I think a lot of photographers like to shoot when the sun's just going down in the late afternoon, when you get that kind of beautiful, kind of orangey, yellowy light. I mean, it is a beautiful time to shoot. It really is. And you don't really want to shoot in midday when the sun is right over the head, especially if people are wearing hats, because it makes a big shadow, and that can be tricky. And it's just not the best light. And, you know, if you are shooting in the middle of the day, I would say try and find somewhere that's shady. And, you know, a day like today, this kind of gloomy, kind of rainy, cloudy day is actually very nice for people's skin. It sort of softens everything, so as opposed to bright sunlight, which can be a little harsh. So I think that's my answer. And I'm actually using a Fuji camera it's called the X-T4, and it's not an expensive camera. You really do not need to spend money buying a Leica I mean, if you want to buy Leica, it's a beautiful thing, but the Fuji is just as good, and the color res is unbelievable. And I actually shot the Levi's and the Dior campaign on Fuji. So not to promote, I'm not getting paid for this, just letting you know. What are other photographers working on hip hop that you admire? Oh my goodness, so many. I mean, okay, first start. The very incredible Jamel Shabazz. He has some photos downstairs. It's like one of my heroes, Martha Cooper, who shot all the graffiti. If it wasn't for Martha Cooper, there would be no graffiti. I mean, people made painted trains. She got the picture that one day they painted them, and then they were completely cleaned. So if it wasn't for her recording those pieces, they would never exist, and you wouldn't have artists. I mean, Futura wouldn't have records of what he made, Lee, any of those people. Jonathan Mannion, Danny Clinch, that's just a few. Okay. Oh, that's so funny. How do you view Jamel Shabazz in the streetwear realm? Wow. Okay, so I know Jamel. We're friends. I'm honored to call him a friend. And I think that, you know, he has the best record of hip-hop streetwear of anybody, because he was photographing his friends on his way to work. And that's the amazing thing. He doesn't like to talk too much about fashion. That's just a fact. I know it, because I think he's more about the people. And there's a movie made by Charlie Ahern, doc about Jamel, that maybe you might want to watch, because it shows him interacting with his subjects and going back and showing him the photos and how people react. And I think that's a really cool thing. And one thing I have to say about Jamel, and one day I was in Prospect Park doing a photo shoot of him photographing other people for a British magazine. We were doing a story about him. And I'll never forget this. He went up to this couple who was sitting on a bench, and, you know, he's nicely dressed. He had a nice raincoat on. He's got his camera, and he just went up to them and said, "My name is Jamel Shabazz. I see greatness in you. I'm a photographer. I see greatness in you." And these people were just, they melted. I mean, there was no way they were going to turn him down when he wanted to take a picture. And, you know, my biggest advice if anyone wants to do street portraits is to be respectful and kind and find something nice to say about the person you want to photograph. And pretty much that seems to work really well. Okay, what was the craziest story you would like to share while shooting? Well, craziest, I don't know. There's a lot of crazy stories, but I'm just going to flick back. Here is one of them, which I didn't really go into. So, okay, this is Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. And they were pretty famous by the time I was shooting this cover, 1988. So they had requested, they wanted to do the photo shoot in a Rolls-Royce showroom, and they wanted a crate of Moet Chandon. Okay, so whatever, that was up to the record company. They did everything. And, you know, after an hour or so, and everybody had drunk all the champagne and done whatever else they might have been doing drug-wise and whatever. It was complete chaos, that's all I have to say. They had asked for 2 models, girls in Lurex bikinis, to be on the shoot. They wanted them in the picture. They're not in this particular picture. And my friend Ellen was styling them, and, you know, she styled the models. They looked great, and the guys, it was just chaos. And I was on a very, very tall ladder, because it was a small space, trying to get everybody in my picture. And I had a Hasselblad camera, which was quite heavy, and you kind of look down. and nobody was paying attention to me. It's like, please, you know, we've got to get together. We, you know, just get a little closer. And as you can see, Melly Mel was having, you know, running around cracking the whip, and, you know, everybody was doing their thing. And the guy in the back is cowboy, or let's put it this way, it's cowboy's jacket, because the roadie is wearing cowboy's jacket because cowboy was AWOL somewhere doing things he wasn't supposed to be doing up in whatever. And it was just, the whole thing was completely wild and crazy, but we did manage to get some really good shots. I don't know how we did it, but it was chaos. And, you know, that's just one little crazy scenario. Okay, and now, what difference did you notice between working with musicians and designers? Good question. Okay, so, I mean, I think, let's see. I mean, when you're doing a shoot like this, you're getting paid well. The day I did this shoot, actually the first day of the photo shoot, we were in Jersey City in a church hall, and the creative director, who's a wonderful man called Chad Hinson, was giving a talk. There were about 100 people in there, me, my assistant, hair people, the makeup people, the models, the prop people. There were at least 100 people there. And Chad was introducing, and this is Greg, he's the prop man, and this is, and then he went, and that over there is Janette Beckman, she's going to be doing the hero shots. And at that point, I looked around, and I'm like, everybody is depending on me to get a shot that matters. And it's a bit of a different vibe when you have like 100 people looking at you, you know. You're supposed to produce something. Same thing with this Dior shot. I was on the street, you know, wearing sneakers. It was cold. It was in London, you know, and everybody's freezing cold. And I'd go to, like, bend down to, you know, be on my knees to get the shot. And somebody comes and puts a blanket under my knee, and I looked around, there were like 30 people behind me, all, you know, do you want tea? Can we carry this? And every shot I took was going directly into a camera, and they were editing it as I was shooting it. The creative director, you know, the whatever, the art director, the this. And it's a lot of responsibility, you know, as opposed to, you know, let's see, let's find, oops, I lost it. Well, I've lost the thing, but as opposed to, you know, me having a musician come around to my house, and I'm like, let's take a walk in the neighborhood and see how you like to stoop. It's just me and the person, we're just hanging out. You know, we might go for a cup of tea, or, you know, hanging out with Salt-N-Pepa, getting a soda. That's a lot less fraught, and I think, you know, it's a different feeling for sure, but you know, whatever it is, it doesn't matter if you're getting paid or not. It's the self-same thing. I feel like I have to do the best I can do. And I think that's the answer to that.
Well, thank you so much, Janette. If you will join me in thanking Janette.
Thank you.
Thank you for a great talk. And the book is on sale at the entrance of the theater, and Janette will be upstairs signing books in a couple of minutes.
Happy to personalize.
Thank you.
Got my Sharpie. Questions, by the way, really good questions.